Hi everyone, Jason from Makera here with another Makera CAM tutorial, and in this one we are talking about the vector contour path processing operation. Now, a vector contour path is to work with a vector shape, so I've imported this vector design here with some text and an outline, and we can of course create a vector contour path from our vector paths menu. Now, vector contour paths have two primary uses, the most common being cutting a shape out of stock. So for example, cutting this outline to release this design from my stock. So after selecting an outline, I can choose my starting depth, which is usually the surface of your stock at a height of 0 millimeters, depending on your work coordinate system. You could then choose to cut to the height of your stock. So for example, 5 millimeters. Or what you might often do is cut a little bit deeper than your stock to make sure you go all the way through, like 5.5 millimeters, and you do have the option of adding that exclusively to the last path. Then we have our safe positions, which you typically don't have to adjust unless you're trying to work around different clamps or fixtures or vices or things like that on your work bed. And we can of course select our tool. So I'm going to choose a tool for metal, which adjusts automatically to my set stock parameters, as we've discussed in another video. And we have our strategies. Now, typically you would use outside, and what that does, if I calculate real quick, we can see that the bit moves around the outline of our design, which means that the entirety of the design will be retained. So the bit is cutting along the outer edge, which means that whatever size your design is, that's what size the final product would be. Alternatively, we can choose inside. This does the opposite, so the bit now runs around the inside. If you were going to cut, let's say, pockets out, or if you were going to cut material out of a stock and you wanted the internal dimensions to be accurate, you might do this. So then that way the inside is going to be the size of whatever your design. Or you can also choose to run along the vector like so. You can also choose to offset. So for example, I might run along the outside and offset by 2 millimeters. So now not only will my design be retained, the size of my design plus 2 millimeters will be retained. You can adjust the direction that you cut and as well as the cutting order. And you have the ability to add ramping, which allows you to, instead of plunging in, enter at a gradual angle, whether that's fixed or automatically calculated. And this is recommended for whenever you're working with harder materials like metal. If you're cutting stock out of your material like this, so if you're using a contour cut to actually cut your design out of the stock, we do need to enable tabs or come up with another way to fix your material. If this design is not fixed to the bed as it's cut, it will actually eject from the material, which can of course be a hazard. Now, I might choose to fix this using double-sided tape, as you can see in some of our other videos, or I can add tabs, which will be material that is not cut and will hold the design in place. So after clicking custom, we can choose triangle or rectangle shapes. We can also adjust the size of our tabs, the thickness of our tabs, and then add them along the outline of our design. And these boxes represent material that will not be cut and then can actually be cut manually in the post-processing stages. So this is how you use a contour cut to actually remove something from stock, so actually cut a design out by running along the perimeter of your design. Another thing you could do with a contour toolpath though is to create some type of engraving. So for example, let's actually create another contour toolpath, but this time I'm going to select the letters here. And if I kept the same depth that I have, I would actually cut these letters out, so actually cut them out of the stock. But instead what I'm going to do is set a depth of, let's say, 0.5 millimeters. And as a tool, I'm going to select one of my V bits, so an engraving bit. I'm also going to change the strategy to on vector, so the bit will run along the text, and I'll leave ramping enabled, but I won't need tabs as I'm not cutting all the way through with this contour cut, just running around the perimeter of the text in my design. This, and if I hide my design, you can see, will now just go ahead and engrave the text onto my stock using a contour toolpath. So two primary uses that you can use, whether you're cutting a perimeter on the design to actually cut lines into your design for an engraving or something like that, or actually cutting a design out entirely of the stock. Contour toolpath is a handy strategy to do this when working with vector shapes.